Okay, so got the solution. Finally got a solution for the Speed Cobra double pedal. And yes, the pedal heel is completely removed. Partly because I really wanted to clean the spindle that all these bearings slash formerly bushings rest on, and partly just because I want to make sure everything looked like it was in good working condition. So such an easy thing to take apart and put back together. It's really not a big deal. Anyway, this is a done side, and I will show you what I bought to replace these Oiles, what Tama calls bush bearings, but they're actually bushings, and they look like this here. So this is a normal one. This one, for some reason, is much wider in diameter, and I don't know why. Each of these was found on each side of this pedal. So this was on, for what it's worth, the far outside right side, and this was on the inside. Clearly they would need two different Oiles bushings, is formally what they are, and the diameters are the same. The outer diameters are the same. The inner diameters obviously are different. So my nylon bushing solution, because I can't buy Oiles, doesn't fit this one, or I probably wouldn't have gone to the extreme that I did to get bearings to replace these bushings, but it perfectly fits in this. And that's a cut down one, by the way. This would be a completely unaltered, unadulterated one that would go all the way in. And actually, you could leave that on there. It probably wouldn't hurt anything. It would affect the ability to pinch a little bit on the in between here, but that's about it. So, and I may have to loosen this side slightly because that's already very close. Anyway, the spindle I re-evened up. It's probably going to be fine, but we'll see. And what we have inside of here to replace these are these two bearings, which I've actually soaked in lubricant. I know they're sealed. I know it may or may not affect them greatly, but I figure, a highly viscous liquid spray type lubricant. I have these set aside for the left pedal in case I decide to do that too and get rid of the bushing system. It does help them spin a little better. Okay, so these are 11 millimeter outer diameter, 5 millimeter inner diameter bearings. These weren't even $1 each. It came in a little set from good old Zon. I got, technically would be 2 spare, which I could use in the hi-hat stand if I ever wanted to, but my hat stand is now brand new, whereas this pedal's been heavily gigged by somebody else before I bought it. And those perfectly fit over the spindle side by side, but you have to ditch the lock nut, which I have in a little bag that I carried to the hardware store. And here's all what I was facing. This is how kind of worn down these parts were. This is the clamp bolt that goes in here, which I've replaced on this side. That's why I said it's 100% done. You can see how pinched it is, right? Threads were completely stripped at the end of the bolt, so there's no bite, which is very problematic, to say the least. And then that goes into a black nut, which I seem to be missing. It's actually, oh, it's right here. And that's the, I guess they technically call it a lock nut, but it's not locking. Kind of funny term. And that's what fits on the underside of the pedal, which I can kind of flip it in a minute and show you. Anyway, had to get rid of this style because the nylon portion, number one, is probably worn out. Looks pretty toast. They do have bite. The teeth are fine on the inside, but they don't lock real well anymore. And I was noticing they were freely spinning even on the stud. And when you get one that works well, that doesn't happen. So if I kind of rotate this over, there's where the lock nut goes into that cavity. It has to be very precise. So I did find, it's kind of tricky to do upside down, but for what it's worth, I did find metric replacement equivalents, and I only picked a couple of them up because the stock ones still work. They still bite on threads, and I don't have a reason to swap them out right now, but I at least have the option to do that in the future with this lock nut here, which I believe fits perfectly in there. Yeah, it does. So that one, this particular one has a 3-point lock thread. Obviously, it takes a second to get out. I'll show you what that looks like, and there's a reason why I definitely wanted this, because I'll probably still use Loctite on these. Little dab of Loctite do you good, right? But this that 3-point nut, which I was not familiar with prior to this, is exactly what you need for the end of this, because as you can tell when you hold these up close, it's half the depth. When you add that nylon lock ring, it makes it almost twice as deep, or very close to 75% deeper or whatever. I don't have that kind of space when you're stacking in double side-by-side bearings, and I want as much bearing clamp down on this as possible. So this is what it looks like to do on this side, what I've done on this side to do it over here. And very thankful to have found all the parts I need, and this is honestly a pretty cheap conversion, and I frankly would recommend it, especially if you're starting to notice your Oiles bushing. By the way, the Oiles bushings are proprietary to Tama. Tama will not sell them individually. I've asked. They seem to even kind of say we don't even, they flat out said we don't know what that part is. One way you can shove these in here is just use something like this. Just make sure it's down in there all the way. You've got to be a little careful because you don't want to jam in on that rubber seal, but yeah, it gets it nice and seated in there. Not going to have the easiest time focusing on this, but let me get this here. And then you just put another one in. But anyway, Tama will not sell this separately. They want you to buy an entire footboard, literally the entire footboard, just to get new bushings. I don't care if they're worth $10, $5, 50 cents. I didn't even need the housing, right? The housing is totally fine. This is, even the rubber gasket is fine. The little O-ring, which I'm used to replacing in G.I. Joe waists as another hobby. But this is solid steel. I mean, that's a nice little machined ferrule, or a shield for the bushing. Bushing is the only thing you need. The little copper collar that goes in there. What it is it's a poly something and or oil impregnated brass. And because it's brass, it's soft. It's fairly soft, right? Brass isn't necessarily soft or hard, but somewhere in between. And the reason why is it's so thin. The walls that need to go in there are so thin that they wear out, because of it. It is a spinning item. It's not going round and round like it is, in this fashion that's already moving more than it normally would. Yeah, I'm feeling a catch here, so probably going to need to loosen that up a bit. Anyway, so we get those two in, and then you get your 3-point lock in there, which I guess it doesn't really matter which side you put on. Get that started. Got the socket here to get it started, and I can wrench the rest of it. And it definitely bites. I mean, in fact, it makes it hard to turn by hand really quick. So I got my 2 bearings in there. And then you kind of gotta, I'm side-eyeing. Yeah, and see, that's too tight. For some reason, that is pinching too much on the actual bearing housing, so I gotta back off this a bit. Yeah, it's still catching. It might be needing to come back off on this side a little bit. Now it's pretty smooth. I don't know why the pinch is so specific. There we go. Now it's very freely moving. So the beauty is, once that's done, this chain's getting kind of bound up and I got stuff in my way here. I've ditched the Oiles bushing systems entirely, right? These are just for the shelf at this point. Keepsake, memento, whatever, something I don't want. These bearings are cheap enough to replace. All the other parts are new enough to last a long time. Then you get your new machine screw, which I went from the stock Phillips head, which, you know, if you ever do play barefoot and you happen to use a screwdriver on this, it does start to, you know, flake up the metal in between the cross, versus this is less likely to have that happen. It's also a stronger bolt, I believe, than what was stock. So put your machine metric screw in there. I wish I could tell you the size. I just know that it matches this thread because it perfectly fits the stock locking nut, which is black. Obviously tested all this at the store. I brought the pedal to the hardware store and everything. And then, can't really do this left-handed all that well. I am a drummer, but I tend to turn the opposite direction when I'm doing twisty stuff. And you can clamp on these nice and tight because they're just pinching down on stainless steel, you know, bearing housings. And as long as the bearings aren't being bound up in there, everything is, sorry, I got that off camera. As long as the bearings aren't being bound up in there too tight to where it's like constricting the flow of the ball bearings on the inside of the race, you really only care about the spindle in the middle that obviously has the ability to still rotate without restrictions. So I'm going to back off this one a little bit. I feel like it's too tight. And I would also probably recommend putting in Loctite on these nuts, which I'll probably do after the video is over. And that's that. You now have a fully functional, very easy to flow, rotate pedal, which of course if I get a screw in here, I can start to at least kind of get the effect of how well it functions. All the screws, but that ain't one of them. These are trashed. That's right, it's this one. Pardon the camera shake here. Wish these weren't all Phillips. Nice if they at least had Posi or something, but probably, actually I'm gonna, these are nice bolts, by the way. These ones are nice, and they're clearly a nice shiny stainless type finish. I would get all these started before you tighten them down. Tightening down the center one first is not a good idea. Not all the way anyway. See, I've been having a hard time starting the thread. Anyway, I'm going to pause this for a second while I get that going. Okay, so got all three of them in. Sorry, I'm doing that off camera. Actually back over here. And now I can tighten the center one. Definitely don't want to strip these, and they're harder to strip because they're well made. They're definitely a nice shiny stainless type bolt like the ones I bought today, except these have more of a chrome finish on them. And flip this thing over, I bang my granite counter, and you have a beautifully flowing, evenly spaced here. Zoom back in. You want to make sure that the spindle is even on both sides, so when you're pulling in the tension on these metric locking nuts, that this stays even here so that you get the flow. And I did notice this without the bearings overly pinched with these C-clamps. It is, while you can clamp down on them pretty tight, you don't want to pinch them so tight that it starts to affect the inside, the actual ball bearings on the inside of there. If the frame is getting too squeezed, you got to keep in mind these are very small. So, you know, just a matter of pressure on the item, on the object. You know, if you're squeezing on this too tight, that race isn't thick enough to really protect those little ball bearings in there, and it could actually start to smash it, even though they're very tough. They're nice steel bearing sets, but nonetheless, there's your fix. And you have a, I'll zoom out for a second. to capture the whole thing on camera is not the easiest with my current setup, but. And here is how nicely that flows. And these bearings were also changed as I've shown in other videos, so this one it's nice and loose. There's 2 new bearings in the housing here. Same as the stanchions have 2 new, but anyway, what you need is no play this direction. This is really sloppy when these bushings go out. This starts to totally teeter left and right because of the play that happens in, around that spindle. And you want to make sure obviously that this is unhindered, that it's just strictly rolling all the ball bearings. And there you have it. Easy solution, easy enough. And this is with really worn out parts. You may not have, stripped screws. You may or may not need a strip bolts. I mean, you may not need a nut for that to be replaced. I mean, I technically didn't either. I think this honestly looks a lot cleaner too with Allen heads on it, and it's a little easier to not hack or mess with. You obviously need to get the right type form-fitting bolts. These also recess a little bit more, which I prefer the feel of. I like having a little bit of a dip there and not having them completely flush. And yeah, get these little 11 by 5, 11 OD, 5 ID bearings. Take 2 apiece, and boom, no more Oiles bushings. I'm not gonna say Oiles isn't making a good product. They probably do. When it wears out, you're SOL, because they do not sell them separately. And when I talked to other bearing companies and other things out there, they said that this must be proprietary to Tama, because the only thing they had was like 3 millimeters too big of an outer diameter to make any sense. And I'm talking about the collar, the actual bushing itself. This would be a bushing. Okay, this is a nylon one. This is the item I'm talking about. The outer diameter here, inner diameter is still 5, or otherwise it wouldn't have fit at all. Outer diameter was like almost as far out as this flange, and that was as small as they made. And this was a company that was recommended by Oiles America on their website. It's called Bearing Something Supply, with multiple locations. So clearly they don't make these separate. Tama doesn't sell them separate, or doesn't seem to want to. Maybe if you have some inside connection at Tama, you can get a hold of fistfuls of Oiles bearings. But fact of the matter is they have a weird contract, and they don't want to share these outside of giving you an entire new pedal board. And then now I have a solution that costs all of bearing set for $7 at the moment in 2025, and under $10 for all these very nice metric stainless steel parts. And that includes extras. This is enough for the left and the right pedals, by the way. So this is enough for both pedals together. You're in it for under $5 a pedal to fix this up and have a great free-flowing bearing system. Sorry the video is so long, but hopefully it helps somebody out there that may have a worn out or used pre-owned pedal that they're picking up new like I did. You can see how used this is. These are supposed to have ridges, and that's supposed to be moderately thick. This pad is actually torn at the front and only has ridges left right here. So that kind of tells you how used it is. I've never treated a pedal like that, but I got a great deal on this, and it works fine now that I've given it the TLC it needed and deserves. So hope that helps somebody out.